and welcome to episode number 23 of Over Theologizing. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Joe. And today we have video. Hey! Oh yeah. Also, atheist bad.
What's going on, Joe?
Tyler. It's been a process, man. This whole podcasting thing is a process.
Well, and obviously we are trying something new. We are trying to say hello to the world, see how this video part works. I guess we'll see.
I don't know. I think with the mugs we got, we might get less viewers, Tyler.
One can hope they'll forgive us,
Indeed.
Well, I'd ask you how life's been, but obviously we were talking on the phone earlier today. You had an issue with your delivery truck.
Yeah.
What happened with that?
This week I have sat broken down in one way or another for at least 7 hours. So it's been fun. I had a blowout. One of my tires blew out the other day. And then today, my liftgate on my truck got stuck in the down position all the way on the ground. And, just sat there, just waiting. It ended up being, I never told you, Tyler, actually. So you're going to learn at the same time as the viewers do that it ended up being fuses. It's just a couple blown fuses. So, yeah, that was fun.
That'll do it every time.
Yeah,
every time.
You're supposed to keep fuses in a commercial vehicle for that reason. And I had a bag of fuses, but someone took them out.
Oh, party foul.
We are. Yeah, here we are. Well, what about you, Tyler? How's your life been?
Oh, dude, it's been warm. It's been warm.
It's been very warm here.
For those that don't know, I really get the impression that Joe and I are having very similar weather, despite being many states away from each other. But we have had a extreme heat advisory in effect for the past week.
Yep.
Yesterday, the notification said that our heat index was likely to be up around 114, and that's hot even for Florida.
Yeah, it's not fun, and it's been the same. It's kind of weird. Me being in St. Louis, you being like a 20-hour drive away, or whatever. Like the same weather, man. It's been like 110s heat index, and apparently they just keep extending it. Just keeps going.
Well, and it's the humidity aspect of it too. It's been shockingly still as well. So there's not really been much breeze.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just been hot.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of heat that'll stick to you. Like you feel like you're wading through the parking lot going to your car. God forbid you have your car sitting in a parking spot for a long time. You get in and it's like an oven.
Yeah, that actually kind of leads into something I wanted to talk about. So weather, you would consider meteorology a science, right?
Sure.
And all we can do with weather is observe, and there's some prediction involved there, and use reason in order to try to make those predictions. Well, I'm somewhat of a debate nerd. I listen to debates like all the way from pretty much laymen debating the existence of God to like highfalutin scholars debating like crazy deep philosophical problems. And I've been listening, I've listened in the past week to, I don't know, too many hours of debate, and in my life, thousands and thousands of hours of debate. And it's just, I constantly think about when I listen to these skeptics and atheists debating, there's Romans 1, creation demands the existence of God, I would say. But that only gets you so far. You can only get so far with pure mechanical, empirical evidence and reason. You can get to theism, and I would argue, honestly, if you include history in that, you can get to Jesus himself. But you can only learn so much about God through strict, just completely ignoring revelation, like special revelation. You can only get so far through strict mechanical, empirical reason. And that doesn't get you salvation. It really doesn't. And I hear all these debates, and the Christians seem to always kind of stoop down to the level of the empiricist and try to make it an empirical fact. But I just, it might sound sort of anti-Christian, I guess, but you can't get to the Trinity, for example, from strict empiricism and mechanical reason. You can say, well, there is love, so therefore God must exist in some sort of relation to himself, and you can get to the Trinity from there, but that even then you're kind of doing some philosophy on top of that empiricism. So I don't know. I just been that's a lot. I maybe I should have let you talk a little bit more in there, but I'm just kind of like dumping a bunch of stuff.
No, it's good. I mean, for anyone who's listened for any length of time, they know that the unplanned, just kind of random, is what the show is about. So, yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I get frustrated a lot of times. They're really good, like solid Christian debaters that debate these high scholarly atheists, and I don't particularly I don't really know what to think of a person like NT Wright, for example, because there's some things that he says that are very not orthodox. But on certain aspects, we talk about all the time, chewing up the meat and spitting out the bones. There's a lot of stuff that NT Wright's really good at. Like, for example, the evidence of the resurrection. Like, he's really good on that kind of thing. But I just get frustrated a lot of times with how, I love debate and everything. I just told you I've listened to thousands of hours of this stuff. But I get kind of frustrated with how I'm not gonna say that a lot of the Christians aren't bold in the way that they debate these scholars, but it seems like they kind of abandon faith in favor of empiricism. Just like I said, it's almost like they just stoop down to the level of the atheist and try to prove everything about the Christian faith through the atheist perspective, and that just doesn't work.
Yeah, well, and I think we've kind of touched on it before, but there's something about it requiring a specific bent on like a materialist have to observe it, otherwise it's not real.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, like there's still so many categories that you kind of have to accept that you can't observe in the way that it's kind of put out, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. And so it's like you have to accept things that you can't see or observe. Like we haven't observed evolution, but we just know for sure
Yeah.
that
They would say they
the
have.
Darwinistic evolution is the way things are.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, like, the atheist will always charge the Christian with, inserting their presuppositions into the data, but the atheist will never recognize that they themselves insert their presuppositions into the
Yeah, they're
data.
doing it too. Yeah.
Yeah, they just act like they're this neutral party that, they have no presuppositions at all on any subject, and they just strictly empirically look at all, and nobody, to be clear, nobody is that way. If you think that you can strictly empirically look at any sort of data without any biases or anything like that, then you're lying to yourself, to be honest. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Biases don't necessarily prove an argument wrong. They just prove you're bent towards maybe one side or the other. But and I also should say, like, talking about these high scholarly debates, if you're gonna listen to them, that's totally fine. I mean, you know, there's definitely some that are worth listening to, but you have to be really careful because they throw around all these terms and words, and they'll name off some random guy that has some thing named after him, and there's just a lot of stuff that can fly over your head. And honestly, at the end of the day, you don't even know if you're listening to a person debating an atheist from the Christian perspective that's even an Orthodox, like even qualifies as a Christian. But
Too many
also,
times.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll be like an hour and a half deep into a debate, and then the Christian will say, well, yeah, Jesus never really claimed to be God, and the synoptic
Right.
gospels are the real gospels, and then the Gospel of John was written, decades after. That doesn't matter. Yeah.
I'll give you all the points. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But honestly, the same exists on the other side too. Like, so often, it's such a strange thing. Atheists will appeal, especially when debating morality, because there's no grounding for morality in a Darwinian or a neo-Darwinian evolutionary perspective, which almost all of them, if not all of them, hold. Um, Ethics are not a thing that matters. There's no grounding for any of them outside of ourselves, so it's purely subjective. And there's other views where you do have atheists. I'm rambling, Tyler. Tell me to shut up if you want me to.
No, you're good. You're good.
You do have atheists that believe in objective morality, and they believe that you can arrive at morality from reason, but that still is not a sufficient proof for objective morality, in my opinion, because whose reason are we talking about? A good example, um, I was listening, I can't remember her name. There was a woman that was debating an atheist. And it was on a completely different subject, but the problem of evil almost always comes up in these debates because atheists
Yeah.
love to throw, how can a good God allow XYZ? And they'll bring up the worst possible thing, of course. But she brought up a really good example, and that was, well, what if uh, through evolution, society decided that abusing women sexually, the R word. I didn't really want to throw the word out there, YouTube
Yeah.
algorithm, but
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
but what if that was seen as okay? And through reason, you would say, well, that would forward the species. And even arguably, I'll throw on top of her point, even arguably, it would benefit the species evolutionarily because the top dogs, so to speak, as far as the males go, would be the ones doing it.
Ensuring, yeah, ensuring reproduction and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. And really, there's no good answer for that. Like, there's no I hate to make it so simplistic because it is such a complicated topic, but at the end of the day, there is absolutely zero grounding for morality apart from something outside of ourselves. And
Well, and the whole thing is like, the Christian will point, or should at least should point,
yeah.
um, to even as early as Old Testament law, as far as like why murder is wrong,
Mhm.
or or really any sort of violation of another person, and that's because we're created in the image of God. Like there's even things, and excuse me for like not having exact references, but like there's talks about like, if an ox gores your neighbor, that ox is to be put to death because it has destroyed something that was made in the image of God,
Right.
and therefore it has to be put to death. And so like the whole debate about like the death penalty is centered around that scripturally, that men are created in the image of God, and therefore if a man takes the life of another man, that man's life is to be taken by the government as the magistrate appointed by God
Mhm.
to uphold his holiness and his order.
Yeah.
So like there's just this, like the Christian has the answer to this that the atheist that tries to do away with God simply can't hold to. And that is like, so many times God in his law, as he's telling what the law is to be, it's, I am the Lord your God.
Mhm.
That's the answer. I am the Lord. Do not do this. I am the Lord.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's basically, like, to sum it up, that there is something that we can point to as Christians that the unbeliever can't point to, because they have to remove God from the equation. Whereas we have something that we can say, like, we have a source of our objective morality, not just this sense of objective morality.
Yeah.
Like, we can point to who says it's wrong, and even in a lot of cases why he says it's wrong,
Mhm.
instead of just saying, well, it's wrong because I just know it.
Yeah. And also being made in the image of God, morality itself flows from the character of God. It flows from who God is. And that itself, the fact that the consensus is murder is wrong, speaks to the fact that we are created in the image of God. Um, the Imago Dei, that's what I was looking for. That's why I paused there. I almost said ex nihilo. That's the other one. That's
That's the other one.
yeah. We're created in the Imago Dei. We're created in the image of God. It's ingrained in us, and yet, the atheist will say, "Oh, well, what about," and they'll say specifically Christians who have uh, used the Bible to justify slavery, or use the Bible to justify X, Y, Z, and that's just not a good argument. People have abused the Bible is not an argument for the Bible is wrong. But yeah, I don't know. I end up sitting there in my work truck, broke down, screaming at my phone, like, you're too smart. Like, you're too smart not to see this. And it is more complicated and fleshed out than we have said. But at the end of the day, like, you'll hear people at church or your friends talking all the time say, like, what's the difference between me and a piece of broccoli in the evolutionary perspective? And at the end of the day, it's honestly truly terrible what the excuse they have to use is. And the excuse they have to use is because we reason. And the reason that is terrible is because, for example, I have a little sister who has Down syndrome, and her faculties for reasoning are hampered. Well, in a Christian worldview, no matter if you're born in a third world country and you're not very educated, no matter if you went to a Yale and got a master's degree, no matter if you were born with Down syndrome, no matter if you're black, white, male, female, doesn't matter. You're made in the image of God as a human being, and you have inherent value. And that's just something that I wish I would hear the Christian side press more. Is, okay, hold on. You're saying broccoli can't reason, we can, so we're better. So therefore, well, I mean, that raises all kinds of questions, but the moral question of that is, what about those people that have less faculties for reasoning? Are they less human? Um, I did hear one person, again, I listen to so many, I don't even remember the names. Um, but one person brought up, well, there's a few things here as far as reason goes with morality, but one person brought up, what about someone that's in a vegetative state? And as Christians, admittedly, it is somewhat of a gray area, because we wouldn't look down on someone that has had traumatic events happen in their life, happen to them, and they are on life support. We wouldn't look down on a person who decided beforehand that they want their family member to pull the plug. But at the same time, God requires that we preserve life. So that person is still alive. They're still made in the image of God. They still have inherent value. But from the atheist perspective, there's no reason to waste resources on something like that, even if there's a chance that they might come back. That's a waste of resources that could go to someone that's not in a vegetative state. The other example was, like, a guy brought up, okay, let's say there's a man who's been married for 40 years and his wife is terminally ill. Well, reason would state that it would be more financially, more emotionally gratifying for him, which it wouldn't, because again, we're made in the image of God. For him to just go ahead and leave her, it would make his life a whole lot easier if he would just go ahead and leave her and go maybe start something new, maybe just, go on with his life alone and do whatever. But we all recognize that that is absolutely horrendous. Yeah, you can't get to a basis for morality strictly from reason. You can get to morality from reason. You just don't have a basis for it,
Yeah, well, and like
or
I said,
anything.
for us, we can point to who has given us a sense of morality, and even why, versus just like this kind of, because here's the thing, like if Romans, if the book of Romans is to be believed, God's law is written on our heart. So
Mm,
like, yes, there is an intrinsic sense of morality baked into every single one of us. Like from an early age, you would understand pretty quickly and easily that murder is wrong.
mhm,
And that's why we feel so strongly when stuff is taken from us, and people are taken from us. Your grandmother dies, or your dog gets run over, or anything like that. Like there's a reason why that's so baked into it. Like we don't know how to deal with extremes like death.
yeah.
And for the people that have like gone off to war and have unfortunately become highly equated with death, they end up having so many other like mental things going on later, because they've had to essentially trade this morality that's baked into them to suppress it to a point to where like now they can't deal with it. They see the faces of their victims and all this. So but like if you remove God from the equation, because your sense of right and wrong dictates that God is not real, you still have to grapple with the fact that we have at least a basic level of morality baked into us,
Mhm,
and we have to fight against that in order to come to a lot of the conclusions that we do.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's always an interesting conversation to hear.
Mhm,
Obviously frustrating as well,
yeah,
but it's always so interesting to hear like how people try to skirt around
yeah.
God.
Well, yeah, yeah, and I just like, I don't know if it's because I've been a Christian for, uh, I guess 11 years now or what, but, like, and again, this is an emotional, this isn't even an argument, but if it were, it would be an emotional argument. I'm not trying to make an argument with this, but that worldview is so vapid and just empty. If you
It is.
believe that the universe is blind and pitiless indifference, like, how are you not depressed all the time? Like, literally nothing matters other than the forwarding of the species. Well, why does the forwarding of the species even matter if nothing else matters? If my only
Right.
purpose.
What is your motivation to continue forward then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, I would argue if that's the only purpose in life, which again isn't even a purpose really, it would probably be better to end the species in their viewpoint because there's a lot of suffering. So yeah, and that's another. Oh man, I'm getting myself onto like 9 different trains of thought here, but that's another, like, their core most important value is pleasure,
Yeah.
and they'll admit that out loud. And the Christian, I'm assuming there's not very many atheists listening to a show called Over Theologizing, but the Christian hears that and is just like, "That's exactly what God says not to do, is to live for pleasure, not to eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die."
Right.
That's what fools do. But it's such a horrible thing, because again, if my whole goal in life is A, forward the species, and very closely next to it, live the most pleasurable life possible, morality is out the window. I mean, we can gratify our flesh in many, many, many different ways, that would do both of those things that are completely awful and wicked, and everybody would recognize they are.
Right.
But
Yeah. And it's a realistically, it's necessary consequences on both sides. Like if we say we believe in God, who has created everything, and therefore morality comes from him, like we have to appeal to that.
mhm,
um just like on the flip side, like atheists tend to be a very depressed people,
Usually
They tend to
pretty
be
grubby.
very aggressive. Yeah. Um, and therefore, like it's that good and necessary consequence of like there's not going to be a ton of consistency,
Mhm.
because I always find it funny. It's like you'll have somebody that says like, there is no objective morality and all this kind of stuff, but like murder is wrong. But at the same time, because of natural selection and everything, if someone's vegetative, to unplug them, it's not really a problem. But
Yeah.
also, I'm not pro death penalty because, and it's like you have to do this dance.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a necessary consequence of being at war with oneself.
Mhm. Yeah, well, excuse me. Swallowed down the wrong pipe. The something that I've noticed is that the more that people learn about how God's world works, often they tend to abandon philosophy in general. And I don't mean
Mhm.
the vain philosophies. I mean just rational, not rational, but critical thinking, I'll say. And they will go to strict empiricism because they recognize that they have inconsistencies in their worldview. And they're content to just say, okay, well, I can measure it. So therefore, it is X. And like we said before, they don't even realize that they're bringing biases into that data. But there tend to be a lot of scientists, high scholarly scientists that are atheist. And I think the reason is that they don't recognize that just because you can measure something and it's tangible, you can taste, touch, feel, it's empirical, it doesn't mean that God didn't do it. Just because you can come up with this equation of E equals MC squared, which by the way, Einstein was a theist, doesn't mean that God didn't make it that way. And that's when they will bring in the argument of the God of the gaps, where it's kind of ironic when they bring that argument in because they're recognizing that there's a gap in their worldview. And they're saying that theists, or specifically Christians, because they pretty much just attack Christians. But, and again, I think I said it before, but it's kind of weird because they often like fall back onto Buddhism, which it's like, okay, you're okay with that one. But, anyway, I think it's probably because they have a non personal God. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Where was I? I completely lost my train of thought. Just because you can measure something doesn't mean that God didn't make it that way. But they see all these naturalistic explanations for how things work, whether it's um, molecular biology. And the Christian looks at molecular biology and sees how intricate and designed it appears, and they say someone had to have done this. Some intelligent design had to go into this. And
Yeah.
the empiricist says, well, it's this way because it's this way.
Right.
And
Yeah. It
that's
just is.
it.
It is what it is because it is.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Well, and oh man, I found a while back some videos by a guy named Dr. Jason Lyle.
Mm. I got a couple of his
From
books.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, from the Biblical Science Institute. And first of all, his if you've not seen his video on fractals,
Mm.
his video on fractals is deeply fascinating. As someone who is both fascinated and frustrated by mathematics, um, it is really really intriguing. But also, like, he has some talks about like why he leans towards a young Earth creation view as opposed to old Earth.
Yeah.
Why, how evolution works, and actually, he even made an argument that um, the idea between natural selection and Darwinian evolution, like they're actually at odds with each other.
Mhm.
Um, so go look him up. But he's one of those kind of people where, because he is coming in with this presupposition of God created all this, to then go and measure and observe and do all this, he's able to say, wow, what an incredible God
Yeah.
that he has done this stuff. And we can even see like the blueprints in the measurements and the mathematics and the physics and all this kind of stuff we can see the evidence of a creator
Yeah.
because his fingerprint is all over it.
Mhm.
And it goes beyond just like, well, we measured it, so therefore obviously it wasn't a god,
Right.
you know. But then, okay, so I wanted to bring this up simply because, and I'm curious to see if you've ever heard this kind of line of thinking.
Mhm.
I know I have many times, but there's this weird idea that God, there are certain things that God can't do simply because like it doesn't fit within how physics works or whatever. You know, how can a God be infinite, and because we have this, you know, God had to come from somewhere because this, and it's kind of like, you know, if you simplify it down to the idea of like a painter and a painting,
Mhm.
or an author and their story that they're writing, you know, the author is not constrained
Right.
by the laws of his own story.
Yeah.
You know, he's above that.
Mhm.
He's not you know, I can't be contained by this story because my life is so much larger than this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
I'm sure you've heard at least one or two people bring up an argument like that, and you're
yeah,
just like,
well,
how do you not?
and even the author metaphor doesn't even begin to describe the vast, chasm between the ontological reality of who God is and who we are as created beings. We don't I and, this is something where, again, like, Christians can't really bring this up in a debate because this is so far beyond, you can't physically possibly measure an uncreated being. That's not something you can measure. You can measure the fingerprints of the uncreated being on the creation, but you can't measure the uncreated being by nature of being an uncreated being. So even the author metaphor doesn't really begin to describe how far above us God is. He's not only not constrained by his story, as the example says, but he's completely unfathomable. Like, presumably, Sherlock Holmes could fathom his author, presumably, right? Like, somewhat similar. Like,
Yeah.
they're both constrained in certain ways, but the author couldn't fathom an unconstrained God fully.
Well, and it's crazy because like when we consider God being so much higher and farther above what we can imagine, like there is still this sense in which God is so just wild to even comprehend because he inserts himself into our reality
Mhm.
in a way that where we can interact with him, we can talk with him, we can have communion with him, and find commonality with others in a way that I mean, heck, he put on flesh and became a man and came and died. Like that's wild. That's crazy. So like not only is he the author, but he has a cameo constantly all through, you know.
Yeah,
He's like Stan Lee, but way cooler.
yeah, way cooler. Yeah, and that's something I kinda wanted to bring up with the problem of evil is it is incredible, complete when Jesus Christ incarnated and became a man, he could have, by all means, been justified in deciding to incarnate himself as a king. The king, like the most rich king in the biggest palace, and that would not have there's no possible thing on this earth that wouldn't be a condescension still for him. And yet, he decided to be born in a manger as basically a peasant, to live a life that was, uh, we'll say, rocky, that would put it lightly, and to suffer and die. Even setting aside the fact that he just died on our behalf, greater love has no one than this. It's someone would lay their life down for their friend. That's beautiful all on its own. But the fact that he decided to live the life he did and suffered alongside with us kind of spits in the face of the argument of the problem of evil. I bring up
Yeah,
Hebrews 4 all the time, Hebrews 4:15 and 16. And I'll say it again because I love it. And you can't do anything about it because this
that's right.
podcast loves the Bible. We do not
Take
have
that,
a high
atheist.
Yeah, exactly. Take it.
Checkmate.
Um, we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are and yet without sin. And I was actually I was talking to one of my customers, and her mom died when she was 10 years old, and some Facebook memories popped up, and she was having a really hard time. And I was talking to her. I brought up that verse, and she was like, "Well, what does temptation have to do with it?" Well, it's like the Christian will recognize that temptation is difficult. It's a suffering. He has been tempted in all things and yet without sin means, yeah, he lived a perfect life, but also it's kind of a glimpse into the fact that he did condescend and he did suffer just like we do. And he suffered way more on the cross, obviously, than most people will ever imagine. And because of that fact, we draw near to the throne. That's that verse 16. But the problem of evil kind of crumbles at the fact that Jesus Christ, God Himself, decided, rather than living this lavish life when I come down there, uh, I'm going to suffer with you, right alongside you. And that gives us not a necessarily an answer for why does God allow suffering, but it gives us brotherhood alongside of God Himself in that He suffered with us. And it gives us comfort, obviously, as Christians, that our suffering, just like His, does have a purpose. There's that First Corinthians verse that I'm going to butcher right now. Um, Suffering produces endurance, endurance produces perseverance, perseverance produces hope, something like that. It's something like
There
that.
you go.
You know what
It's
I'm talking
close
about.
enough,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I think that I skipped a step in there, but and hope does not let us down. So, and again, I butchered that last part too, but you get the gist of it. That's the JSV, the Joe Standard version. But
Oh my gosh.
um but yeah, I mean, we do have an answer for the problem of suffering. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but not only do we have an answer, but we have a God who suffers along with us. It's not as though He condemned the world, rightfully so, to suffering, but also He suffered Himself.
Yeah, there's some interesting like tidbits to bring out from like the gospel accounts of Jesus, specifically, like, first of all, obviously the way He enters Jerusalem the first time is on a donkey. He's
Mhm.
not riding in on this like stately horse,
Yeah,
displaying his status.
that's the second time.
Well, right.
Yeah. No, when He comes back, like, it hasn't
Yeah,
happened yet.
yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
But so even down to like, it's interesting if you look at his temptations
Mhm.
when Satan tempts him in the wilderness. At no point is he lying to Jesus.
Mhm. Well,
It's all true, but it was down to I mean, at a temptation. It was a putting God to the test sort of situation.
yeah.
So like when he's like, yeah, throw yourself down from the temple, and he will command his angels charge over you, and you will not dash your foot against the stone. But like, that's true. Like, that's real. Jesus had the authority to call down legions. Like, if at any point on the cross he decided that he wanted to be done, he could have brought home the host of heaven's armies and just wiped the place clean.
Mhm.
It would have looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. But everything, like, I mean, he didn't come with the presence of a king.
Right.
Instead, he became the son of a virgin who becomes pregnant out of wedlock and is betrothed to a blue collar worker. somebody who has a very just hands-on job. Like, it's not some sort of super impressive position. Some translations will say he's a carpenter. I've heard some debate whether it was a carpenter or a mason or something like that, but whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
The fact is, like, he, being the king of the entire universe, comes down as servant.
Mm-hmm.
He puts on this air of humility and serves everyone. There you go. So, but it's so funny. Like, those are the details that I find so intriguing. Like, he has such power. The fact that, like, even when he's confronted by the Pharisees and he was like, I have the authority to forgive sin. Like, it's not this big a deal, guys. And that's crazy. He's going up against the powerful, and here he is, virtually a nobody,
Mm-hmm.
but yet the most important somebody all at the same time.
Yeah.
And obviously that's kind of the whole story of the Gospels is, obviously there's the salvation story, but it's the story of a people who are actively looking for their Messiah. Their Messiah shows up and they decide, no, that's not him, because he doesn't fit what I want him to be. So the Gospels are truly intriguing in that regard.
Yeah. And it's funny, you talk about how he was objectively kind of a nobody as far as the culture was concerned. Wes Huff brings up a good point. Shout out Wes Huff, tag Wes Huff, get him on the podcast.
Please come see us.
He brings up a great point, and that is that Caesar Augustus, who was Caesar at the time of Christ, was the most powerful, most well-known man on earth at the time. And he had 4 people that wrote about him. You know who else had 4 people that wrote about him, wrote about his life, wrote a biography of him? Jesus. And you have this nobody whose 4 biographies have standed the test of time for 2,000 years. And this is another thing. I actually heard, can't remember if it was a debate that I was listening to or that I was having. But someone said, well, yeah, sometimes stuff sticks. And that's how they explained how Christianity has survived for 2,000 years. Really more than that, because there's a continuation between the old and new covenant. We're Baptists here, but we still believe that. But it has existed for thousands of years and standed the test of time. And yet very few people have read the biographical accounts of Caesar Augustus in 2026. There's a reason why. I mean, at the very least, the atheist has to concede that that's a data point, a significant data point that needs to be examined. And yet, for some reason, they will just, not for some reason. I mean, we know why.
I would say we know why.
They're suppressing bring it back to Romans 1, they're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness.
That's right. That's right.
There's a reason why those accounts have standed the test of time and the others haven't.
Well, and even still, that's not even counting the external from the Bible, secular accounts of Christ.
Yeah, one of them
corroborating.
One of them was literally from one of the people that wrote a biography of Caesar Augustus. His name is escaping me. Was it?
Is it Josephus?
It's Josephus. Yeah, that's who I was going to say, but I didn't want to sound like an idiot. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and even still corroborating a lot of, like they won't say and he definitely raised the dead or definitely healed people or whatever, but they're definitely saying, these are the reports that I'm hearing. Like, this guy sounds fantastic for all intents and purposes. Like, this is a really cool guy.
Yeah. And, some of them weren't even flattering. Like, some of them were, I think Josephus was, I could be wrong, but I think he had a negative view. I mean, he was Jewish, but I think he had a negative view on Christ generally. But then he also corroborated lots of events recorded in Scripture.
Yeah.
So even the
Yeah.
people that didn't like him corroborated what happened when he, you know, when he was walking on the planet. Um,
Right.
that's another
Funny
danger.
how God works that way.
Yeah.
Even the rocks will cry out.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to dive into, debate, scholarly debate, but as I said before, you got to really be careful with it because it really gets into the Christian basically saying, I want to abandon anything that has to do with faith. Faith is almost a cuss word in those debates. I'll bring it back to what Jesse said when we had him on. Man, I loved this little turn of phrase that he had. He said, faith allows us to take the ramp of reason before we take a leap. And faith is not this God of the gaps, unreasonable, superstitious, presuppositional. That's a word I usually use for a different theological topic, but presuppositional like assumption that I have. It is I'm looking at everything around me and I'm looking at what God has done in my life and I'm seeing Jesus Christ is working, the Holy Spirit, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are working in and through creation. They are personal beings actively participating in creation, including myself. And there's just no denying it. I love the beach ball analogy. The skeptic is like someone swimming in a pool with a beach ball, and they're just trying to hold that beach ball under the water, and it just keeps coming up. You know?
Yeah, I like that. Well, and I've always found myself a little frustrated at this perspective of like blind faith.
Yeah.
Some people will just be like, oh, well, we just got to have faith. And it's like, right. But the problem is we don't have a blind faith.
Hmm.
We have a faith because promises were made and we know that, per history, God keeps his promises. And so it's not just like we'll just hope and see it works out. There is something genuine to hope in, to place my hope in beyond just we'll see, and
Like Pascal's wager.
right.
Yeah.
Now, that said, like, yeah, there's going to be plenty of times in your life that are I really don't know how this is going to turn out.
Right, but and this might be where you're going. I hate to cut you off, but you got me on. But that faith is not unreasonable
Right.
because if X, then Y. If God promised in the garden to Adam and Eve that he would crush the head of the serpent, and then he did it. If God promised, like we could go on for hours, all the promises God made and then fulfilled, why would it be unreasonable to believe that God would fulfill his promise that he's working all things out for my good and for his glory?
Well, and when Jesus says like I go to prepare a place for you, and you can basically you can trust me because I've said it.
Mhm.
Like I keep my word.
Yeah.
It's there's an intensity, but especially in like the old ancient Hebrew and Greek style of writings, there's a lot of things that are just kind of like we read it in our modern American English lens and go like, I don't really get why you said it that way, but whatever.
I know
But
where you're going with
it
this.
would have had tremendous impact. And so, like I mentioned earlier, how God in his law will say, like, you should not, don't, you must wash your hands before you eat your food. I am the Lord, or whatever. I'm struggling to bring an exact example. But those are like for God to say that, that's like, oh, okay. It has an intensity behind it that we just don't really
Yeah.
get in our American English.
Yeah. I thought you were going somewhere else with it. I
Oh,
had
well,
a
take us there.
I had a very specific thing in mind. You were talking about, I don't know why I thought my brain is just maybe random, but anyway, you were talking about how, maybe there's events in our lives and we're uncertain. And then we go to scripture and we see that God promises that, like I said, he's going to work all things out for our good and for his glory. And how can we know that? Well, if God says something, he's going to do it. I am that I am. God is not this. Not only is God not limited, but He's also completely and totally faithful to all of His promises. And this is the exact point in the problem of evil, where the skeptic will argue, well, basically, we have no reason to trust God's promises. But and then they'll say, oh well, you're going to suffer here on earth, and I think it's Peter. I think it's Peter that says, basically, if man, I'm blanking. I'm not doing good on my Bible references today. If these things aren't true, basically, we're like to be mourned. Like if what we're talking about isn't true, then we should have ate and drank and been merry, because tomorrow we're going to die, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah,
I can't remember the exact verse. You know what I'm talking about. It's
yeah.
definitely Peter that says it. But again, I lost my train of thought. But oh yeah, yeah. The skeptic will say, "Oh well, you're going through all this suffering, and it's all on this suspicion that heaven might be real." And they'll say, "Oh well, I am better because I want you to enjoy your life because heaven might be real." And we brought up Pascal's wager, which I'm not even sure Pascal meant what the colloquial idea of
Right.
what Pascal's wager is. I don't think he really meant that. If you actually read into Pascal, I don't think he meant that you should just believe in God because the reward is great. That we won't get into that. But man, I'm just losing my train of thought completely. I'm just rambling so much this episode. I apologize.
Well, I mean, there is certainly something to be said about the atheist saying to the Christian, you're suffering so much in life because of a suspicion of heaven,
Mhm.
but still the Christian can say, like, even if that's so, when I come to the end of my life, I am still better for having lived that way than self-seeking.
Yeah.
I mean, there's literally studies on this stuff where you have people that do like selfless acts and all this kind of stuff instead of seeking their own personal pleasure, and they find themselves so much happier
Mhm.
with life. Even God removed from the equation. So imagine how much more fulfilled the Christian is. Like I just got done listening to my favorite podcast here lately, aside from ours,
Archaeologizing? Oh,
obviously.
okay, okay, okay.
Aside from ours, obviously. Um, and it's called Ninjas or Butterflies. If anybody wants to check it out, they're good, goofy fun. Love to
Shout out.
talk about silly conspiracy theories and stuff. But they had this guy on named Paul Bach, and he was talking about all the hardships that he's been through. He's like former special forces and got medically retired, and turned out like part of his problem and some of the issues that he was having were actually basically because of so many TBIs, traumatic brain injuries. Like he was epileptic.
Mm,
And so a lot of these times where he thought he was just like zoning out, no, it turns out he was actually having like a focal seizure, you know? And then his wife had cancer and they weren't sure if they were going to be able to have kids and all this kind of stuff. And then he's like, now that we're kind of on the other side of this, we are just so overwhelmed with joy for being able to suffer for the Lord,
mm,
because this has brought about so much good for us and the way we minister to people, the atheists cannot say that.
right.
They cannot say that because they have no hope. When you close your eyes and breathe your final breath and you become nothingness, it was all for naught.
Yeah.
And so, I mentioned natural consequences earlier. When that's what you believe, yeah, you might as well live life to the fullest as far as seeking pleasure, because once it's done, it's done.
Mhm.
Like if that's truly what you believe, it makes sense. But for the Christian to say, no, but there's so much beyond, and we have Jesus saying, I would not tell you this if it weren't so. So we have hope. We have a reason, even for our suffering.
Mhm.
And arguably, like a lot of us here in the US, like we've had our own sufferings and they still pale in comparison to so many all over the world. And even still, like sometimes it's hard for us to get out of bed in the morning, you know? So, but when we can take that extra breath and say, God, I'm going to hold you to your promise. Like that's the kind of putting God to the test that you can do. You know, God, you promised, and I'm trusting that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know where else to really go
Yeah.
with
Well,
that,
I was
but
just going to say, like, suffering, eh, you can make the emotional argument of people people who suffer that are Christians tend to be happier. And so therefore, and again, this is kind of like the colloquial Pascal's wager view. People are happier, therefore you should just do it. But the Christians that I know that have suffered the most are some of the most joyful people. And it's not just what I mentioned before, this brotherhood with Christ in suffering for the Lord. Um, but it's also like we're suffering on behalf of each other, kind of. I have a good friend who has uh, several kids with diabetes. Really difficult thing when your children have diabetes. It's a big deal. And there's another family in my church that a lot of their kids have diabetes, and they were able to help a lot and alleviate a lot. That's the uh, bearing the weight of each other's suffering, that it's an example of what Christ did. It's not equal to, but these are not. You again, you can make that argument that okay, well, this is just yeah, it helps people, therefore good, but it's not just that. It's also the fact that we're suffering on behalf of the Lord. We are sheep led to the slaughter, and we are like Christ was seen as this lowly people that um you know aren't flashy with our money, aren't out, well, shouldn't be out clubbing and doing all these crazy excessive things, and people think we're missing out. But in reality it's kind of like the ultimate twist where they're the ones that are really missing out. And we should also recognize that, and that should be a drive for us to call them to repentance. And it can be really difficult for people that live that way. I mean, myself included, in the past, living excessive lives, just constantly seeking pleasure. Obviously, their hearts can't be changed without a work of God anyway. But that should be a drive for us to call these people to repentance in a loving way, and that's not often done in debate. But using the example of Christ, loving them, and showing them that there's something better. There is hope. We do have hope in our suffering. It's not just blind and pitiless indifference.
yeah. Well, if you loved this episode, Joe, how can they let us know?
Sorry, you don't have enough AI credits to.
Yeah.
That's a throwback. If you don't get that, then you're not even a fan. Just kidding. If you love this show, it would mean so much to us if you gave us 5 stars on whatever podcast catcher you're listening to. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Smash that like button. Whatever they say.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Knock it out. Just destroy it.
Just punch it. Punch your monitor. Don't do that. Also, uh, we've had quite a few emails actually. Over theologizing at gmail.com. Some possible guests in the future. We've had some really interesting, intriguing emails. Surprising given the fact that this is a show with you and I.
Right. Just two dudes who don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah, and then also X/Twitter at over theologizer. Hit us up on there. We do have a YouTube community. We are not the most active on our socials. We're working on that.
We're trying to work it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're like we said at the top of the episode, this is kind of our foray into having video as well. So Maybe we'll have some clips out there, make an Instagram or something, YouTube Reels, or YouTube Shorts, excuse me, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts.
Yep.
This is why I don't do that much social media.
Yeah.
I can't keep them all straight. Also, while you're there, adding us on X/Twitter at Overtheologizer, make sure you tag Wes Huff.
Tag Wes Huff.
Like we've been saying. See if we can get him on at some point. We have reached out. I don't know if anybody remembers that or if we ever said anything. We have reached out, actually. So who knows? Maybe one day, if you give us enough likes and subscribes and all that, maybe he'll notice us.
I'm just going to throw it out there, like, Wes, love you, man. And if you want to have an easier podcast than going on all the podcasts with skeptics and atheists and Muslims and stuff, just come on here. Just hang out.
Well, the great part is, we're doing this online. Joe and I don't even live in the same state. So
yeah.
If we can do this, we can totally just add one more like we've done many times before.
Wes, you're not that busy. I'm just kidding. I know those facsimiles probably take a long time to make. And also,
that's true. That's true. I've also put out a few feelers for some other potentially interesting guests. So hopefully we'll have that. But yeah, are we missing anything?
I think that's it. Love you guys. Thanks for listening. You guys are the best.
I hit the wrong sound cue. Whoops.
We're new to this.
Yeah, we're having to do some things different, but we appreciate your patience. Love you guys. See you, Joe.